Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our shift session on using stories to promote sexual health in the over 45s. I am Amanda Jeffrey, and I work at Metro Charity as the head of sexual and reproductive health. And before we go any further, I will introduce my colleagues on the panel with me. And for ease of memory, I'll just go across my screen. So, Nuri, can I jump across to you, please?
Yes, hi. I'm Nuri Masenko, and I was the director for the Shift films.
Great, thank you, Nuri. And Wim, I'll go over to you.
Yeah, my name is Wim Zeiloff, and I'm working for SOH Netherlands, in the Netherlands, of course, and happy to be here.
Thank you. And Kate, I'll jump down to you.
Hi, my name is Kate Meyer. I'm a nursing lecturer and researcher at Odyssey University College in Belgium and one of the Shift team members. I'm very happy to be here.
Wonderful. We're happy to have you. Thanks, Kate. And over to Manyi.
Hi, everybody. My name's Manyi Tong. I'm a sexual health and HIV consultant working for Kent Community Health, and it's fabulous to be on Shift Live.
Thanks, Manyi. It's really great to have you back. You were a superstar last time, so no pressure this time. We'll go over to Sophie.
Hi, I'm Sophie Mcgannon. I'm a project manager at the Health in Europe Centre, and we are the lead partner for Shift and responsible for bringing all these lovely partners together. So I'm really happy to be here.
Oh, thanks, Sophie. We're glad you could join us. And down to Tom.
Hello, everyone. My name's Tom Line. I work at Metro alongside Amanda, and I'm the in-house filmmaker here. And I work with Stuart writing the scripts of the Shift films that we're going to see some clips from today.
Great. Thank you, Tom. And perhaps appropriately, over to Stuart.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Yes, I'm Stuart Marquis. I'm a project support officer. I work for East Sussex County Council, one of the partners within the Shift programme. And yeah, I work with Tom. I'm one of the co-writers on the Shift films.
Great. Thank you, Stuart, and welcome. And last but not least, over to Tony.
Hi, I'm Tony Croom. I work for Public Health in East Sussex County Council, which is in the UK. And that's me.
Great. Thank you, everybody. Well, welcome. It's really great to see everybody on this panel. And I think it really brings to light sort of the intention that we had with Shift originally, which was to make sure that we had people from all different backgrounds. So we have some academics, some clinicians, some community workers, and some sort of government or local authority representatives. So I think it's a really great panel and a great program. Speaking of the program, we'll introduce it in just a moment. But very quickly, I just wanted to give a shout out to the fact that today is the 14th of January, which is National STIQ Day. And it's a day really when the world wants us to focus on taking care of our sexual health and making sure that we all get tested for sexual health regularly. The day of the 14th of January was picked because it was 2 weeks after the festive season. And we know that with many STIs, so sexually transmitted infections, it can take around 2 weeks to notice. So it's a really good time to get tested if you've been busy over the holidays. I'm going to pass over quickly to my colleague Manyi, who can just give us a little bit of information about why it's important to test regularly for sexual health, for STIs, and just keeping good track of your sexual health in general. Over to you, Manyi.
Thanks very much, Amanda. And as you rightly say, STIQ Day, 14th of January, is 14 days after sort of Christmas and New Year festivities. However, it's also 1 month ahead of Valentine's Day. And if you are a Valentine's Day romantic, it's quite a good idea to kind of get your sexual health in check before that kind of very romantic day and whatever might happen on that day and afterwards. So a month before getting yourself checked is a really good idea. And for me, as a clinician, as a person who sees people who wants checking up for sexual health, I think sexual health is important as your mental health, as your physical health. People often think about New Year's resolutions. I'm going to get fit, or I'm going to work on my mental health. I'm going to have some personal time. But how about getting yourself a sexual health checkup? And nowadays, certainly within the UK and most of Europe, you should be able to get a sexual health screen for free. And you should also be able to get a sexual health screen either by seeing a health practitioner, or potentially, certainly in the UK, there's a lot of online postal kits, so you don't even need to leave your house, and the sexual health kit can come to you. And this can be whatever age you are. And certainly with Shift, our focus is for people aged 45 and older, and I certainly fit into that category myself. But also younger people as well. So for any person who's having sex should get a sexual health screen. And the two main reasons why I would say people need to get a sexual health screen is, one, if you or I have a sexual infection and we find it out early, it means it can be treated early and prevents complications for me or you. And also, if you do get tested and I get a sexual infection or you get a sexual infection, it reduces the risk of passing it on to others. So you can break that chain of infection. So looking after yourself is a priority, but you also look after others around you. So that's why I think it's a good thing to think about sexual health checking today. Thanks, Amanda.
Amazing. Thank you, Mani. You summarized that beautifully, as I knew you would. And so, yeah, we at Shift and we in the field of sexual health, we often forget that not everybody spends all day talking about sexual health and thinking about sexual health. But at this time of year, it's a really great time to start thinking about it. And then, sort of consider exactly as Mani said, how going forward and into the year and into the following year, you can just make sure that you sort of keep track of it and think about it. And that probably segues really nicely into where Shift came about and what Shift is about. So I'm going to pass over to my colleagues. I mean, everybody's welcome to join, of course, but I'll pass over to my colleagues, Kate and Tony, just to give a bit of a background in the program and let us know sort of where the idea came from, why it's important, and what we're trying to do here.
Thanks, Amanda. So this project, I think it started quite a few years ago. It takes a long time to get a project together, but it's an inter-reg project, which means that it's specifically trying to bring several European regions together to work on a problem that's relevant for everyone. So this was a project that was designed to support and improve the sexual health of people 45 and over. Why 45 and over? That's a really large and diverse group of people. I also am in the group. And that's because it's something, sexual health has often been really focused on a younger population, especially around reproduction and so forth. And we really feel that the 45 and over has been a neglected group, but we are an active group of people that continue to be sexually active, to have relationships, and sexual health, as Mani said, is important throughout the lifespan. So that's the sort of focus of the Shift project. It's led by the Health in Europe Center. So Sophie is here representing them today as our lead partner. But as you can see, we're quite a diverse group of partners across the Netherlands, Belgium, and England that are taking part. So it's funded, as I said, by the Interreg 2Cs project fund. And as we also, Amanda pointed out, we are a bunch of academics, people who work in health, people who work more in government or third sector organizations. So it's a diverse group trying to work for the sexual health of a diverse group of people. Tony, do you have anything to add?
No, not really. I suppose just one extra element is that we're focusing on positive sexual health and trying to avoid the negatives. We tend to focus on the negatives a lot about infections, etc., but there's a lot of positive things about sexual health, and certainly speaking as someone who's over 45 and who still has sex as well.
Shocking, Tony. I think very quickly, although it's sort of it does bring us a little bit back to the negative. One of the reasons we were able to get funding for this project was because sort of across Europe we were seeing a real increase in infections, so sexually transmitted infections in the over 45 population, and this was quite new and interesting. And there was lots of, or maybe not new, but it was definitely interesting, particularly the increase. And there was some sort of conversation and thoughts about why this might be happening, and we wanted to explore that. Why are we seeing this increase? What do people know? What don't people know? But as Tony said, also to make sure that we're linking it up to things that are positive. So, sex is fundamentally should be a positive and pleasurable activity. And if it isn't, we want to address that as well. And generally speaking, sex happens within the context of relationships, which can also be very positive. So we wanted to talk about those things as well and make sure that we're looking at, why are we having sex? How is it good? When isn't it good? And what can we do about that? And make sure that, exactly as Mani and Tony have both said, that, we recognize that people over 45 are very active, both sexually and otherwise, and shouldn't be ignored in this, really important field. with that in mind, one of the things that we have done with Shift is we have done some research with the over 45s. So we looked sort of at two populations, one just general people over the age of 45, and then two people who might be more vulnerable to sort of poorer sexual health outcomes. So, there's a variety of reasons that make people more vulnerable to poor health. And so we sort of looked at targeting those populations. So whether they're LGBTQ, whether they're from Black or minority ethnicity backgrounds, whether they're living in low socioeconomic statuses or sort of on or near the poverty line, maybe they're immigrants or refugees who don't know much about the health system. Maybe there's drugs or alcohol or housing or homelessness issues. So a variety of reasons. We wanted to make sure that those voices were heard as well. So what we did was we went into the communities. We asked a bunch of questions via focus groups and questionnaires, and we came up with sort of 6 main areas, topic areas, where we found out that there's some specific knowledge that's needed, and 4 kind of kind of themes, which I seem to forget one when I'm talking about it, but I think it's knowledge, awareness, access, and stigma. Nod, yep, that's right, isn't it? That really kept coming up, those 4 themes. So with that in mind, and I'm going to pass down to Tom and Stuart in just a moment, we decided that we were going to create some films that looked at knowledge, access, awareness, and stigma, but also that specifically spoke to 6 of the main issues that had come up. So I will pass down to our lovely script writers, Tom and Stuart, from whom this idea was really born. And I have to say that I was a bit cynical when I was like, oh God, everybody remembers. I was a child of the 80s, and I remember some of those awful public health films, or some of the great sexual health education that we had, where I learned that although there is no actual bone in the penis, it is sometimes still referred to as a boner. So I remember those videos and I was a bit cynical. However, luckily and thankfully, that's not what happened here. So I'll pass down to you, Tom and Stuart. You can tell us sort of where the ideas came from and about the films, and then we'll open up the panel. And I should have said sorry at the beginning. Obviously, I'm not very good at this yet. Any viewers who are watching, if you have any questions on social, you can put them on Twitter, you can put them on YouTube, you can put them on Facebook, I believe. So any way that you're watching, you can interact with us, type in a question, and one of our panelists will be happy to answer it. And we're happy to hear from you. Great. Now I'm really passing.
You're muted, Stuart.
Typical. There was always going to be one of us who was going to start speaking before the mic was on, and it had to be me. But there you go. Thanks, Amanda. Yeah, it's really strange, actually. It's about a year ago since we really started thinking about the Shift films and putting them in place. And funny enough, it was the last live event for which myself and Mun Yi put together that improvised consultation between a doctor and patient.
That's right.
And I think actually it was from that. I think we realised that we have the knowledge and the skill sets there to try and broaden that, and use storytelling and drama as a way of actually allowing people to access, the information and the advice that we're giving. So I think that's what it grew from. And obviously myself and Tom, working on the project, we had a good insight as to just exactly, those 4 Shift pillars, and we started to think about just exactly how we would tell those stories. So I think from that point, there was quite a lot of brainstorming. There was quite a lot of conversations between ourselves and partners. And we also set up some inspiration sessions where we had lots of people coming in and chatting to us, and just giving us the personal view and some an idea of some of their experiences working within the field of sexual health. And quite a few of the films are actually born through those experiences, actually, together with some of the interactions that came through and some of the discussions that came through the research. So I think that was really what sort of like funneled it down to the ideas of just exactly, what type of stories that we would tell. Isn't that right, Tom?
That is right. I was going to say as well, I think that the key concept was that we wanted to create something that wasn't clinical per se, like a lot of training videos or films that you might see in kind of this arena, but something that was more kind of dramatic, was kind of normal, like real kind of stories that people could relate to, and not necessarily in clinical settings either. So at home, at a workplace. So people would watch these stories, they would relate to the characters, and they would kind of see that this information and these kind of scenarios also can relate to them and their own kind of sexual health, and they can get some knowledge from that through that, rather than it kind of being forced upon them in a kind of more like educative specific way. So that was kind of the idea.
That's it. Yeah, I mean, as a device, storytelling it's really quite immediate, and there's also obviously an emotional angle to it, and people can also, you know, if they recognize stories, we all recognize stories really quite, you know, quite quickly. If we were to just show you the picture cards from I don't know, it's like the children's story The Three Bears, you would know what that story is, and you would know what that arc and what your expectation would be at the end of it. So yeah, I think that's the sort of like the starter position, but also I think, and I'm sure you'd agree, Tom, one of the other things really was to give the films the broadest audience possible, and also give them the in terms of the project, the broadest usage as possible. So whether we could use them on the website to engage with members of the public, or with professionals in the training to be able to use elements of that. So it was quite a really wide scope.
Great, thank you both. And I think that this really speaks to the idea of, that sexual health isn't something that happens only in a clinic. Aspects of sexual health absolutely happen in a clinic, but it's a very, very tiny part. Most of our sexual health is in the context of relationships, either with ourselves or with other people. And I think the films really do a good job of showing that it isn't just, issues or dysfunctions. It's, the stuff that happens day to day. And when we were creating these films, and I say we loosely, what I mean is Tom and Stuart, who really did, just a remarkable job with these. But, when we had those original conversations, it was about, okay, how do we get people to look at these videos and see themselves in them? And, from what we produced, I think it's a really, really good job. So without further ado, I think we're talking about these films, but nobody who's watching this has actually seen any of them. So let's, if we can, Mark, who's lurking in the background doing the magical background things, can we maybe just see the trailers for the film so people can get an idea of what we're looking at? And then through the conversation, we'll show some more clips as well.
I don't think there's much chance of me getting pregnant.
That's not what I'm worried about.
So I can see you have a yearly screening. That's very good.
Well, I have a new boyfriend and we would like to have sex.
Right.
Ik ben HIV-positief.
Is in godsnaam chocolade.
Marleen,
Ik val van je!
Oh, I can't believe you think I might have something like that.
vind jij mij nog steeds echt leuk?
Doe niet zo belachelijk.
Je bedoelt dat je een SOA hebt?
Ik kan me niets ergens voorstellen dan seks hebben op dit ogenblik.
Karen, anyone can get an STI.
Amazing, thank you. Every time I see that clip or any of the videos, I know, Mania, that's how I feel. They're so good. Just the quality. You guys have done such a wonderful job. And I really don't want to feel like I'm taking any credit for it because, you guys really did it. So I'm going to pass over to you now. So I'll pass over to Nuri and Tom and Stuart. Obviously, everybody can jump in. But I guess, where we want to talk now is sort of what were the themes that came up in the research that we did. I know that we've identified sort of 4 pillar themes and then the 6 key topics. So I just, let's talk about those. I'll open the panel up now to talk about sort of the themes, what came up, what were the key findings, and then we can sort of move on from them and talk about how we kind of narrowed those down into the 6 films we produced. So yeah, maybe pop your hand up if you want to go, and then I'll pass over to you. Or I'll nominate somebody. All right. Why don't I nominate you, Stuart? Because you look ready.
I was going to say. What was channeled into the 6 film ideas? I think it's fair to say actually that everybody, all of the partners, have played differing roles in this. Because I mean, we spoke with a real wide variety of people across the project and external to it as well to inspire and influence some of the things that we wrote and the elements that we took on. Like I said earlier, we used the 4 pillars really, but in each of the films, we wanted to give them sort of like a core subject to discuss, but around that, be able to touch on other things within sexual health. So, for example, the HIV film there also looked at not just the clinical aspect of it, but also there's some of the stigmas around that, things like disclosure, and also answered some of the questions about keeping protected even if you are, things like U equals U. Do you still use a condom and so on? Tom, do you want to expand on that?
Yeah, I think maybe we could go into a little bit more detail about like the process. I think so. We kind of touched on some of the sessions that we ran. So the inspiration sessions, I think as we called them. So a lot of people in this room now were part of those. Basically meetings across the partners, but also internally within our own organisations, meeting with sexual health professionals and outreach workers, people who work in the community. Kind of getting their kind of stories and the key issues that kind of came up for them. And so a lot of those elements of bits of anecdotes and bits of kind of information that were channeled into the stories from there. And obviously then also specifically the research as well. So kind of taking some of the key kind of issues that kind of kept on cropping up and trying to kind of put those into the films as well. So, for example, the menopause. So we've got a story specifically around women going through the menopause, and kind of a lot of the things that we were often cropping up were that people would think that they wouldn't necessarily need to use protection once they were past that, if they were coming out of a long-term relationship, for example. Because they thought that, I can't get pregnant anymore, but actually doesn't necessarily mean that you can still get an STI. And so things like that were things that we were channeling in from the research as well.
Does anybody else have any thoughts on? Oh, go ahead, Wim. Maybe I'll jump over to you about just sort of the topics that came up.
Yeah, what I liked about storytelling, and I've seen a little bit more than the clips. What I like about your storytelling is in several of the movies there's something very surprising. Well, at least for me, surprising is happening, and I think for most of the people who will be watching it, the outcome is surprising. An older lady at the STI clinic. A woman with HIV instead of an MSM with HIV. So that's not only educational, but educational in a fun way. It makes people wonder. Oh yeah, that can really happen, and so that's very good about the storytelling.
Yeah, and like I said earlier, storytelling is something that everybody understands really, in the way that it's structured. And so yeah, we tried to use as many sort of elements of drama as we possibly could. So things like elements of surprise or making things quite funny, all of those things really just to engage people and get people to sort of like reflect and recognize themselves within each of the stories.
Okay.
Well, I think actually Stuart's comment just now, I think, reflects one of the things we found in the research initially that we did, that people didn't feel that sexual health was necessarily related to older people, that, and so you just said that word, engage people. And I think that's one of the things that's really strong about the films, is that it shows it just as part of life, that sexual health. And so I don't know how we're doing about spoilers, but there's an integration in the stories. There's 6 separate stories, but there's an integration that show how multifaceted it is, which is something that came out of our initial findings too, that sexual health is not completely separated from it. So I just wanted to pick up on what you said there. And then from my work package, what we're involved with as a partner is more academic, that it's also then useful as a teaching tool to give insight, because one of the things that came up in our research was that healthcare professionals don't understand. They're often young. They don't have an insight into that population. So even without just factual information, it can be a really useful teaching tool for the emotional side or the perception. So I will stop talking now.
No, that's
Oh. Stuart, you're not following the rules. No, go ahead, Stuart, and then I'll jump to Monday. No, it's okay.
No, I was going to say all of the stories are obviously they're embedded in relationships. What we didn't want to do is just turn up with lots of facts that weren't hidden. Hidden's not really the right word, but weren't part of a more of a larger overall story. And I think that's what helps people reflect on them and recognize themselves within it, as opposed to a doctor in a clinic saying, "Oh, you have this," and taking it from a very clinical perspective.
Absolutely. I'll jump to Monique, and then I'm going to pass over to Sophie in just a moment.
Thanks, Amanda, and thanks, Tom, Stuart, and Nuri for these great films. And I'm looking forward to more spoilers shortly, even though I have seen them. But they do look great. But what I'd say is these films will help open up talking about sex. And I think that's really important. So regardless of whether you're in a long-term relationship, you're enjoying casual sex, you're having sex with multiple people, it's not a problem. It's just having that dialogue, talking about sex, sexual health, what you enjoy, what you don't enjoy, what the issues could be in the particular area that you have, or what not issues you don't have, what's fabulous and enjoyable and pleasurable. And I think having that we've seen the term used where people look like me. So, for example, in dramas, that you're having that kind of social interaction with, say, BAME or MSM or whatever. It's having people that look like over 45 people having sex. So rather than young, nubile, stereotypical, and I'm putting that up with big kind of caveats, because not everyone looks like that when they have sex. Trust me, everyone looks exactly the same when they've got their clothes off. But it's having that discussion about sex, being able to talk and communicate with the sex partner you have, whether it's a long-term sex partner or a short-term, whether it's about the menopause, whether it's about symptoms, whether it's about pleasure, whether it's about worries, whatever. Having that ability to talk and using these stories so that people can think, actually, that is probably a little bit like what's going on with me at the moment. Okay. I can probably use this to open my dialogue further. So the communication is great. And I think that's really important.
Absolutely. And I remember, Tony, I will come to you in just a sec. I remember, when... again, this is going back to the 80s, and I'm Canadian, and there was a sort of a very popular television show in Canada that probably nobody else has ever heard of. It was a bit rubbish, but it was called Degrassi High, and one of the story... Oh, do you know it? Oh, great. So one of the storylines in Degrassi High, or maybe it was Degrassi Junior High, I can't really remember, was that one of the male students was HIV positive, and it was one of the first times kind of in popular culture that there'd been any positive representation of HIV. And I remember watching that as a child, and so he had this best friend, and he was sort of being bullied a little bit in school, and the best friend said, well, all you need to do is just don't sleep with him without a condom. That's all you need to do. Nothing else you need to worry about. And it was the first time that it was sort of represented like that. And I think, looking back, that was only, well, I say only 38 years ago. That was quite, 38 years ago, but look how far we've come. I'm just going to pass, Tony, I am aware that you want to jump in. I'm just going to pass over to Sophie for a moment. As our lead partner, I think it'd be really useful to get your views just on kind of the social innovation aspect of it, Sophie, and how this relates to the broader picture of our funders and where that's coming from. So if you don't mind putting you on the spot, I'll jump over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Amanda. Yeah, I think it's worth remembering where this project came from, which we discussed briefly at the beginning, but it's a long time in the making. The project idea has been around for a long time, and the project itself started in 2019. But before the beginning of the project, there was a lot of work done to get it funded, and it's not an easy job getting these big projects funded. It's European money. It's big application forms with lots of words and research done, and the funding stream that we went for was social innovation. And when we were putting the bid together, what really came out was that nothing like this exists. Often when we're putting these projects together, we do research about what the problem is, where the problem lies, how we can tackle the problem. And the thing with this project is there wasn't any research. I mean, there was some out there, but it was really kind of specific in a specific area. And there wasn't easily accessible data around the sexual health of people over 45. There was loads of stuff about younger people. But yeah, that was what was really of interest to the funders, and they loved the idea when we came to them with the Shift project idea, and they were really keen to fund it. And I think these videos really, they're innovative, that nothing like them exists out there, which is, I think it's groundbreaking really, in the sense that destigmatizing this topic is so important. And I think, like what Kate said, a lot of the healthcare professionals coming up aren't over 45, and it's important for them as well to talk about this topic without attaching any stigma to it. And I think it was just worth remembering that this is a socially innovative project, and that's quite amazing, really, to be part of something so innovative.
Absolutely. Thanks, Sophie. Yeah, I think it's funny, isn't it? Day to day, you can sometimes lose sight of, where you came from, where did this little gem of an idea start? And that was exactly the aim, was to, sort of bring sexual health in the over 45s into the, the modern world. And so it should be. I know, Tony, you had something to say, and then I just want to very quickly after that summarize the sort of 6 topics, and then we're going to show another video clip. So let me jump to you, Tony, very quickly.
Yeah, it was just a quick one. Is that what I love about the films are the real. There's that potential there. We discuss about sex all the time. There's actually a real positive thing about not having sex if people choose not to. And that link between getting older and more of a focus on relationships and intimacy, that might be more of a focus than the actual act of sex. And I think these films really explore that excellently, and explore the impact of wider life, and especially wider life as we get older, upon our sexual and relation health.
Yeah, I agree, Tony. And very well said. That's exactly right. And I think it's interesting that so many of us in this project are either at or approaching this age and thinking, I don't feel that old. So yeah, absolutely. Now, listen, I want to just sort of change tact a little bit. I realize we can talk about the project forever, but I want to sort of pass more over to Tom, Stuart, and Nuri at the moment, just to talk about sort of what was important. We've all sort of seen the films, those of us on the panel, and hopefully those of you watching will watch it and have just, really been blown away by the quality. So I guess I just would like to hear a little bit more from the 3 of you, although everyone's welcome to jump in, about, the process of script writing. Nuri, what was important to you as a director, or producer? I never can understand the difference. This is so not my area. But directing and or producing of the films, what was really important to you? What did you really want to shine through? Just sort of pass over to you guys to hear about that process a little bit more.
I'll take this. So I was the director, Amanda. I was helped by my amazing producer, Patrick, who really helped me so much with this. But yeah, I was very excited to get onto this project, and I mean, I have to be honest, it's not necessarily a topic I thought about before, and as been sort of mentioned, there's sexual education in schools, and then people young ages are sort of targeted and educated, and then sort of afterwards there's not that much sort of out there. So I thought it was a very interesting sort of project to come onto and sort of contribute to. And I guess I wanted to I think what I read in the script and what I liked so much about the idea was that it was educational but still taught in a sort of a narrative and interesting way. And I think as we mentioned before, there you can have some very dry sort of educational videos that feel very sterile and sometimes sort of hard to relate to in a way. And so it was refreshing to be able to work on these stories that sort of have a human touch to it. And in a way, you know, narratives and drama is something that people can connect to and can have a stronger message and leave a stronger impact. And it's something that people will be able to sort of learn more from in a way. And so I really like the way that Tom and Stuart implemented that educational aspect, you know, while having also narrative and following these characters who feel very real, but also in a very intelligent way, sort of, you know, being able to sort of implement small tidbits of information. And, you know, I learned in the process as well, which is always great. So yeah, I was very happy with sort of the scripts that I was given, and Tom and Stuart did a great job, and it was lovely working with them and sort of, you know, together with them building up and seeing what we could create. And yeah.
It's interesting actually, Nuri, from mine and Tom's perspective, because I mean, obviously we, in writing the scripts, give you a framework to take away and to realize and you know to put on film. And normally in the real world, we'd have a lot more access, we'd be a lot more involved at a physical basis with you in that process. So I'm actually, I think you're to be congratulated in managing to actually realize what you have and to produce what you have from the material that me and Tom gave you, with all of the added restrictions that we've had around COVID and not actually having been able to be in the same room with you on occasion. I mean, we got to work with you once on location, which was great. But no, I think, like I say, all of the hurdles as well, we managed to successfully get over.
Yeah, I was sort of hoping to avoid the C word, but I think it's just nigh on impossible these days, isn't it? And I think you've raised a really good point, Stuart, that and what you were saying earlier, Nuri, as well, that without a sexual health background, being able to translate, you know, very sort of nuanced scripts, you know, and I can tell you that they're nuanced because of, you know, the to and fro that we had as project partners going, well, should we use that word or this word? Oh, you know, we don't want to say this, we want to make sure that we say that, or, you know, we don't want to make it look like, I'm trying to think of a good example, you know, that HIV isn't a risk, but at the same time we want to destigmatize it. I mean, that's a really nuanced thing, the message to try and convey. So I guess I'm curious, just from your perspective, Nuri, but like, how was the process for you of translating the scripts that were, you know, black and white really on a screen, you know, without having the luxury of us on site to, you know, these beautiful films that you created?
Yeah, it's interesting. I guess I did have sort of Tom and Stuart's help throughout. So and it was very useful sort of being able to sort of discuss things with them. But what was interesting sometimes, what we did find was that we each, all three of us, had a different interpretation of it in a way. I guess the way I came from it was, you know, at the end of the day, they're all human stories. So I was trying to sort of tell those human stories. And you know, and what I think when you mentioned as well is that it's a lot about communication, and everybody's talking in the films, and that's sort of the most important thing, and sort of making sure that people talk about it. And so yeah, it was sort of just sitting down with Tom and Stuart at some points, and then just sort of trying to figure out what is the story we're trying to tell exactly, and then hopefully getting that out of the actors. And yeah, we were very happy as well and lucky with the actors that we found, because I feel like they all sort of embodied the characters and those the humans, and you know, as mentioned, also those from every aspect of life, and everybody has a different story. So yeah, that was it was an interesting process for sure.
It's funny, isn't it, when, you know, often you hear these stories about, you know, when you've read a book and then, you know, you have this idea of what the book is like in your mind, and then inevitably you're disappointed when the book is translated into a movie. So I sort of worried about that a little bit with the scripts, but maybe because they're scripts and they weren't novels. But you're exactly right. You know, when I watched the final films, it was like, oh, you were made for that. You know, you were made to be that person. You were made to be that role. I am very aware that we haven't talked at all about the sort of Brussels or the Belgium and the Dutch sort of influence. We're going to come to that, and just to make sure that we do remember that this is not just a UK project, and 2 out of the 6 of the films were produced in not English. So we'll come to that in a moment. But Tom, I just wondered, before we show the next 2 clips, will you just, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but just summarize the sort of 6 topics that we ended up whittling them down to, and sort of what that process was like for you and Stuart, because I know we started with 8 and then we worked down to 6. Yeah, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so we've already touched on a couple of them, but HIV was one of the stories. One of the topics was contraception and kind of STIs. One was specifically around a much older people accessing sexual health services. God, this put me on the spot, I'm trying to remember all of them now. Then we had
menopause.
Yeah, we had specifically a story about a woman who's going through the menopause, and also an interlinking story with that, which is relationship and kind of the nuances of the impact of their kind of physical and intimacy life. And then the last one was about somebody who's a recent migrant to the Netherlands, accessing who is kind of scared to access sexual health services for the implications that might mean on their kind of visa application kind of thing. So yeah, those were the 6.
And then the 2, just for just because I think it's interesting, the 2 that we decided not to proceed with, if I recall, one was around disability. Is that right? Disability and sexual health. And it wasn't at all that we thought it wasn't important. It was just that the research seemed to sort of move us towards the other 6. And wasn't there one as well, which was my favorite, because I suppose I deal with a lot with young people, and I thought it was quite a funny script. But it was about older parents trying to support their young people talking about sex and realizing that the young person's sexual education had been significantly better than theirs, particularly around things like LGBTQ, so lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgendered, questioning, and queer inclusive language, and it sort of ended with the young person schooling the person who was trying to give them the talk, and we just didn't we weren't able to produce 8 films, but I just thought it was interesting that those were the other 2 kind of topics that had come up as potential areas. I think if we're all happy, let's move to the next clips, and then we'll sort of like whittle it down a little bit and talk more about the nitty gritty of how we're going to use the films, the language, the populations, that sort of a thing. So if that's okay with you in the background, Mark, are we able
Should we
to
get Stuart just to introduce these 2, just to give a bit of context to the clips as well?
Sure.
Do you mind, Stuart?
Yeah, no problem. We've got 2 clips to show you. One is from Karen's story, and this is sort of around condom use. It was quite interesting actually. One of the because we did some of the research work working with colleagues over at Chichester, and one of the anecdotal bits of evidence came out there was from a person who said that they're not at risk of catching anything in terms of sexually transmitted infection because they don't sleep with that type of person, and which was just a real eye opener for us of how people just generally regard sex and sexually transmitted infections and the entire world itself around it. That, oh no, my behaviour is fine, So that's the story one, and then the second one is Marion and Hannah's story, and that's around the age assumptions and preconceptions of age. So yeah, there you go, Tom.
Thank you, Stuart. The clip.
Do you want to move upstairs?
I'm good here if you are.
Sure. It's about time I christened this sofa. Oh, you won't need that.
Sorry, we could slow down if you want.
No, don't slow down. I just mean, you don't need to use a condom with me.
If it's okay with you, I'd rather we did.
That's very flattering. But seriously, I don't think there's much chance of me getting pregnant.
That's not what I'm worried about.
What then?
Look, I'd rather use protection to be safe.
implying? That I'm some sort of strumpet?
Look, I'm not implying anything.
Either you want me or you don't. I'm not desperate.
I do. I know. But it's just...
I think maybe you should go. And you might as well take this with you.
Marion Moore? Miss Marion Moore?
Miss Marion Moore? This way, is it?
So I can see you have a yearly screening. That's very good.
Well, I have a new boyfriend, and we would like to have sex.
Right. So you have a boyfriend?
Darling, I have 3.
3? Have you had unprotected sex?
Oh, I'm not sleeping with all of them.
Oh, I'm not suggesting.
You're not alone. Most people think having sex at my age is completely outlandish.
I don't. I think it's great.
Aren't you going to take my blood?
What? Yes. Look, I was just saying that it's not a problem. You're just unusual. Sorry, I don't mean you're unusual. I mean it's unusual. For me. For you being here for a, you know. I'm sorry. Can we start again?
Brilliant. Honestly, every time I watch them, I think they just get better and better. I think that, you know, they're so well done. Yeah, can we start again? And I mean, I don't know how as a clinician you'd possibly claw back from that. That isn't how you would be treated if you came into any of our clinics or Monyees. We would absolutely just not think anything of it. Kate, yeah.
No, but I just, for me, from the teaching perspective, for the module that was about communication and being able to say, I'm sorry, I love it, because we're so scared of that as clinicians. Yeah. And actually, sometimes it's necessary to just reset yourself. So I love it, because at Monyee's clinic, of course you wouldn't see that kind of behavior, but this is the kind of thing where sometimes, in other settings, people just are surprised or taken aback, and you can take it back. You can acknowledge it and move forward. I love it. So.
Absolutely, Monye.
And I think, as you rightly say, I think that honesty in healthcare in general is important. We don't always have exactly the right train of thought when me as a doctor might see somebody. We all do have our own preconceived thoughts and judgments, and yet when we're faced with somebody who is potentially older wanting a checkup, we do have to go with that flow. And I think we all have to remember to check our judgments at the door sometimes. And if we have said the wrong thing, put our hands up saying, I'm really sorry, I didn't mean to say that. Can we start again from there? And I think it's only fair. And again, talking about communication, us as me and my colleagues as healthcare professionals want to have the best conversation with the people that sit with us. But yet from those videos, we also want the wider world to have that best conversation they can about their sexual health with their friends or their healthcare professionals. Thanks.
Absolutely. I noticed, Wim, you had your hand, and then Tony.
Yeah, well, what I like about this clip is it has 2 very positive aspects. One is the self-care aspect. The lady knows what she wants, and she knows it better than the professional at first. And the client teaching the professional, which is, yeah, I see Monye nodding. It can be very welcome in specific circumstances. Yeah.
Absolutely. Tony, did you have your hand up?
Yeah. I think also it illustrates what actually is quite a widespread reaction in healthcare. Maybe not in especially sexual health clinic, but generally in healthcare. We've had projects where people have said they won't do HIV testing on people who may be the same age as our grandparent, and that literally is their reason for not testing. So I think it's a really important message. And also, many of us do have relations who do have quite active sex lives at a much older age as well. And I think it's important to recognise that we can't write people off because they're older, and yet as society we quite often do.
Obviously, except for our own parents and grandparents, right? We're just all clear about that. Right. No, I think that's exactly it. And I think in a way, although the healthcare provider, it's not a very good consultation at the beginning. However, I think what's really evident, and this is what we always say to everybody, is that she's open and willing to learn. And she doesn't get it right, and then she holds her hands up and says, "Look, I didn't get it right. Let's go back and let's do this over." And we often hear, particularly at Metro. So for those of you who don't know, at Metro, so one of our main mandates, or our main mandate, is looking at embracing difference, and that means working with people from a variety of different backgrounds. And we often hear from sort of the related workforce, people are really anxious about getting it wrong. Well, I don't know how to address somebody who's trans, or I don't know what non-binary means. How do I talk about that? Or if somebody's a lesbian, how do I know what to do? Or there's a lot of anxiety, and the message that we always try to convey is go in with an open mind and an open heart and ask questions. And most of the time, provided that you're approaching it with an open mind, as that healthcare professional did, then you're able to work with the client to get to a really good space and understanding, and then you learn as well. So when it's approached like that,
and dare to make mistakes.
Yeah, and dare to make mistakes. Exactly. Oh God, I think back to some of the first consultations I did. I won't tell some of the stories now because we don't have time. But oh my God, I can just thank the patience of some of the first people who had to put up with my learning. So yeah, and apologize if they're listening today. Let's talk about the sort of where we're going to use it. I'll introduce it, and then we can sort of open the panel again. So we've all talked already a lot about we really wanted the films to be relatable. And we wanted them to be relatable to as many people as possible. Of course, it's impossible to make sure that we include everybody and get everything in. But hopefully, the message comes through that we want you to feel like parts of you, at the very least, can identify with with these films and these messages. And where we will be using them, and I suppose this harks back a little bit to what Sophie was talking about with the original kind of intentions of the program, as well as what we learned with the research. So let's take a few steps back, and I can explain. When we did the research, we really wanted to find out, both from people themselves, what's affecting you, what's going on in your lives. Tell us about, when you think about sexual health, what do you need to know? But also we wanted to make sure that the people who are working with people over the age of 45 have a little bit of awareness as well. And, I've seen this a lot when I've gone out and about and done sexual health training, with the idea of, say, supporting young people, and there happens to be 2 or 3 professionals in the room. And I very quickly realized that the professionals in the room, so say it might be a teacher or a youth worker or, somebody like that, they're learning more than the young people half the time. And so it's very, very difficult to expect somebody to talk about sexual health and to support another person around sexual health when they themselves don't have a good enough understanding. So that's why we sort of have 2 or 3, depending which way you look at it, kind of areas of what's the word that I want? Sort of where we're trying to get these videos to end up. So the first one is just general people over the age of 45. Sometimes people might be facing the issues, that the films cover, and that's wonderful. And if it gets them, even just thinking about their sexual health, talking about their sexual health, maybe viewing the videos with their partner, that's wonderful. And hopefully it opens up to them, not just the topic of the video, where they can access services if they need to, maybe to reflect on some things. Hey, I don't have to live with this. I'm experiencing, for example, vaginal dryness. I don't have to live with this. So that's great. Then the second one is, of course, as I was saying earlier in this session, that we at Metro and some of our other partners really focus a lot on people who are vulnerable. So we wanted the videos to also be applicable to people who are vulnerable, and we listed some of the categories earlier. And so we tried, when we were doing them, obviously we didn't have an unlimited budget and we couldn't create 8,000 different videos, but we tried to create the videos in such a way that whatever your background was, when you were watching them, you would be able to take something about them. And so hopefully some of the populations that we're targeting, and we'll be going, of course, into communities later and working with different groups. So like I said earlier, immigrants and refugees, people people with like housing or homelessness issues, people living in poverty or near poverty. We'll be taking those videos to those groups with the hope that it can support their sexual health. And finally, and perhaps most importantly, we'll be using the videos with what we're calling in Shift the wider workforce. And what that means is any professional of any age, but who is working with somebody over the age of 45. So as an example, let me try to think of a good example. You might be, going in regularly to I'm trying to think of a really good example off the top of my head. I should have written one down. You might be going in to seek some support around benefits, and you're trying to ask about a local sexual health service. Well, if the person who you're asking has no idea, they're not going to be able to support you. They're not going to be able to have that conversation. Same with a nurse. Even nurses who aren't working in the field of sexual health, they sometimes don't have the language, they don't have the questions, they don't have the skills to be able to talk about it. So we want to make sure that that nurse who you maybe have gone for a cut in your arm is able to then communicate with you about your sexual health as well. So the kind of idea to normalize talking about sex and sexual health and relationships in any setting. So with that in mind, the videos will be used to target the wider workforce. And we've actually got this great thing in the process of being developed. It's called a VLE, a virtual learning environment. And that's where these videos will be put. So they'll be put for the wider workforce, and they'll also be put for individuals themselves, and you can log on. And our very first module is live. So we're just putting the little banner at the bottom there. We're very, very excited that our very first module is live now for our wider workforce. It's called Start to Shift. So obviously a lovely play on the word of shift, and it's the idea that workforce, the wider workforce professionals can start to shift their thinking about sexual health. So the videos are on there, as well as some great resources, language training, etc. And I'm going to jump to Kate, who can tell us a little bit more about them. I think I've talked enough now.
Sorry, I just wanted to say, because it depends on when you watch this video ultimately, but if you're watching it on the 14th of January, we are still developing this virtual learning environment. So you can log in yourself. It's great. It is targeted at this moment for the people, the wider workforce, more than the general public. And it is the Start to Shift program module that's on there, which we think would take about an hour and a half for people to work through, and covers a lot of the general topics that we've talked about so far as the aims of the Shift project. As Amanda identified, we are hoping to put more courses and resources on there in the future. And this is the only Shift module that we're planning to have fully online and asynchronous, we call it, which means anyone can follow it at their own pace on their own time. We are developing 3 further modules targeted at the wider workforce, which are going to be live modules in that they will be delivered by teaching staff, with a focus on assess and communicate, developing more specific knowledge and skills. So embrace difference, we're calling it, and reduce risk. And then in addition to this VLE, and I can pass over to Sophie and Monique, I think we're also targeting a website, which will be more for the general public, and the videos will be available there as well. That is a work in progress, though. But just so if somebody watches this, video in 3 months, then the VLE will hopefully be fully populated. But if it's the 14th of January, please log in. Start to Shift will be there, but not much else at this point.
You're on mute, Amanda.
Sorry, there was some hammering going on back here. Of course, people picked today to reinstall our new washer and dryer with no notice, of course. So I muted myself. Anyway, yeah, I think, Kate, that's exactly right. And I must remember that it's not just today that people are going to see it, but that the VLE will be populated with the 4 modules that you've outlined over time. And our intention with the VLE is that it will remain for at least 5 years, if not longer, so that anybody interested in sexual health, it's free, by the way, we should have said that, can log in and do the learning, do the training at any time, and they can work through it themselves. You mentioned a word that I think is really interesting, Kate, which was asynchronous, and that the Start to Shift module is going to be the only one that is asynchronous. What about the ones that I'm presuming are synchronous, and how will those 3 modules look a little bit different?
So the plan for those is that they will be given live, but it could also be online. I mean, we weren't going to talk about COVID, but it has opened up possibilities that we can offer courses in a way we hadn't previously thought about. But the other 3 modules will be taught, whether physically in rooms or online, varies. And what we're hoping as a product of the Shift project is that we will provide materials. So the Shift partners will deliver some of these courses in the Netherlands and Belgium and in the UK. But the intention is that we provide a sort of script, if you will, and PowerPoints and resources that other people who want to deliver this kind of course for their own workforces or in their own country would be able to do so. So that's the difference between the synchronous and asynchronous thing. The other ones would be more guided and supported. And we would hope that that sort of heterogeneous, like different kinds of health and social care professionals come together and learn from each other a little bit too during those ones. Whereas the online Start to Shift module, it's just you and the computer working. But we are hoping to have an interactive element where people can post things, and then other people who participate in the module will be able to see what other people have contributed. So we're aiming for interaction everywhere that we can.
Wonderful, thank you. The other thing is, it's probably quite timely now to again bring in UK, but also you, Wim, to talk about why it was important that the videos were done in two different languages and subtitled, and how you feel that the videos and the training and the learning is pan-European rather than just UK focused. So again, not to put you on the spot, but if you could talk to that, yeah, I'll open the panel again. That would be wonderful. Maybe I'll go to you, Wim, if that's okay.
Okay, thank you, Amanda. Yes, I think the videos are pan-European, and at least also the English versions are very recognizable. And I think of the 6 videos or 5 videos, there are at least 3. I don't know exactly. I'm not very good in counting, but most of them are in Dutch, so that helps. And no, they are really recognizable, and not only for the wider workforce or the healthcare professionals. I think they are they can be of very good use in the trainings of healthcare professionals, but also for the wider workforce. And I don't know exactly how it will work with the primary target group, but yeah, let's see what happens. Let's see what it does.
Nuri, did you have your hand up?
Sorry, no, I just put up 4 because 4 of the films were in Dutch and 2 were in English.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
you for counting.
I was thinking that doesn't feel right to me, but then sometimes you just have to go with it.
I definitely remember 4 shoot days in Amsterdam. So
yeah, you're quite right. It's 4 in Dutch and 2 in English. And Kate, did you have any thoughts? Oh yeah, Stuart, go ahead.
Sorry. I just also wanted to point out. I mean, it's actually just really, really lucky that myself and Tom were writing the scripts and developing them, and obviously the intention was always to make sure that we were going to make them as pan-European as possible, both in terms of the stories we were telling and in the language. But we're really, really, really lucky that we had someone like Nuri, who's such a good director, but with excellent language skills as well, to be able to interpret them in both languages, really. And also Nuri's actually done some of the translation of scripts for us as well, for us to be able to put the subtitles together. So hats off to you for that as well, Nuri. I'm glad we found you.
Yeah, it was definitely a fortuitous partnership, wasn't it? It seems like exactly the right people came, as it should be. So just to sum, yeah, Mani, go ahead, and then Tom.
Just wanted to say, if you're wondering about where these videos will sit aside from this virtual learning environment, they will also be contented on what we call our Shift Hub website. So we are in the process of developing a partner website utilizing resources in all the partner countries about sexual health in the older person, and included will be the videos. So potentially the videos may be your way in. You may see the videos hosted online and then thinking, oh, I want to know a bit more, and then you'll enter the website, or you may see them through the virtual learning environment, or you may see them directly through logging in going, should I use condoms if I'm after the menopause? And then you may come in through that way to the website. So there will be a wider way to access these videos. They won't just be hidden in a kind of in a learning environment. It will be wider. So I think it's been a fantastic tool, and we as the message within the videos is communication, we want to be able to communicate these videos widely as well.
Yeah, that's such a good point, Wenyi. And it's that whole idea of that 360-degree learning, which I realize is one of these catchphrases now. So it'll probably be outdated by the time you watch this video. However, the idea is that, however your entry point, you will be able to get in, or whatever your entry point, you will be able to get in and have a bit of a play around. And, what will be interesting to you will be different, to each person. You might already know a lot about STI transmission, but you might not know anything at all about menopause. So you can sort of pick and choose what you want, but the idea is that the final product will be very interactive, very clear, and that you'll be able to sort of jump to from one topic to another, to one resource to another. You can use the videos. We'll have things like access quizzes, where you can say, okay, what did I learn? What do I need to know still? We'll have like Kate was saying about the forum, where people can talk about what they've learned. So there'll be a variety of different ways to learn, a variety of different media. So some will be still images, some will be PowerPoint, some will be very boring basic training, some will be the videos, and that you can go in and it'll be like a little layer, and you can kind of take one thing and then learn about another thing and learn about another thing, and it will all be integrated and linked up together. So that's the idea, is that you don't have to do everything. You can kind of pick and choose what's relevant to you, what's relevant to your work, what's relevant to your own personal circumstance, and that it will be sustainable, so that we can we don't, as is often the case, with projects, once the funding goes, the project goes, and the resources go, we want it to be able to be sustainable, so people can use it, because it's so good. And menopause is always menopause; it doesn't change. STIs are always STIs; they change a little bit, but the transmission and prevention is not really going to change that much over the years. So I think if we're all okay, I would really like to watch some more clips, because I think it really motivates the discussion. So if we're okay, we'll watch the next two. Tom, do you want to introduce these two? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So the first one we've got is our HIV story, which is called Myra and Lucas's story. And we're kind of at a later scene at this point, but the film begins with Myra disclosing her HIV status, and they're in a kind of new relationship. So we've kind of come full circle, and now they're kind of having a conversation about U equals U and what that means. And the second story is a story that's specifically around the menopause, and that's Marlene's story. And in this one, we just kind of see a scene where she's experiencing some symptoms of the menopause. And actually, we do kind of, it's majoritively touching on those symptoms, but we do kind of bring it back to sexual health. And when you watch the whole film, you'll kind of see that, and also the interplay in the workplace, and how it's potentially perceived by managers and that. And we're trying to have a positive outlook on that as well. So that's kind of the messaging in the film.
Thank you, Tom. Over to you, Mark.
Eén ding vind ik nog verwarrend. Dat met niet meetbaar en niet overdraagbaar. Als jij het me niet kan geven, ben je dan niet gewoon genezen?
Nee, het is gewoon dat de behandelingen tegenwoordig doeltreffend zijn. Kijk, ze kunnen het virus in mijn lichaam zo laag krijgen dat het niet meer meetbaar is. En als het niet detecteerbaar is, dan kan ik het ook niet doorgeven.
Ja. Maar we moeten wel nog steeds condooms gebruiken.
Ja, dat is voor de andere SOA's, ter bescherming.
Genoeg voor 2?
Wat?
Genoeg water voor een extra kopje.
Oh, ja, er is genoeg hoor.
Hey, en nog bedankt hè, dat je die vergadering op mij hebt afgeschoven.
Sorry. En nog bedankt dat je het voor mij hebt overgenomen.
Ja. Ik denk alleen dat Anita niet zo tevreden is. Wat was het deze keer? Noodgeval? Familie? Autopech?
Absolutely brilliant. I I'm only 38, but I think that I'm one of the lucky few who seems to be experiencing perimenopause quite early. So I can really relate to that scene. It's like, oh God, just get away. And I'm sure many people who are going through menopause can relate as well. Let's talk very quickly about the U equals U message, just because I think it's really important for viewers to understand it. It can be quite complicated. Mani, do you mind if I just get you just to clarify what that means, and then we can jump forward?
Thanks, Amanda. So in terms of people living with HIV, if someone is on treatment and their HIV viral load is what we call undetectable, so when they have a blood test, we cannot find any HIV virus in their blood, it means they're undetectable. And research has shown that undetectable does mean untransmittable, means there is zero risk of HIV transmission to the sexual partners of the person living with HIV. So U equals U, undetectable does mean untransmittable. And we are happy to say that to anybody, whether they are living with HIV, reminding them that U equals U, but also the partners, the loved ones, the friends and family who care, who worry about potentially person living with HIV. What does that mean to them? But U equals U is a really powerful message, and we really want to kind of make sure everybody is aware of that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Mani. I think it's so important to highlight it because it really just shows how far we have come in understanding HIV as an illness, but also the treatment that that we've come up with. It's so different from many years ago, and I still hear people say things like if you get AIDS you'll die, and they don't understand the difference between HIV and AIDS. They don't understand U equals U, and it's such a simple message. And I think the more people that understand it and can transmit it is great. I'll jump back to you again, Mani.
Just to say, people living with HIV, certainly in the UK and kind of Northern Europe and who are undetectable, will have a normal lifespan compared to the non-HIV living population, because that's how good treatment is. Obviously, unfortunately, people living with HIV and the general population who are getting older are at risk of strokes, heart attack, diabetes. It doesn't stop those things being managed. But if everything's managed well and you have someone living with HIV matched with someone not living with HIV, they will have exactly the same lifespan. So it does not stop people from doing the things that they want. And it certainly doesn't stop people living with HIV having sex.
It's actually amazing, isn't it, when you think about it? How far we've come. And I don't know if anybody else watched that. It was on Channel 4, so it might have only been available in the UK. But it was called It's a Sin. Oh my God. I would encourage you to watch it if you haven't, although you need some tissues at hand. But looking at that versus where we are today, it's just it's just remarkable. And to be able to say that people living with HIV who are on effective treatment are living the same lives, the same lifespan as people not living with HIV is actually amazing. So we really want to drive that message home. But I don't want to take away too much from the topic at hand, which is these amazing videos. And we've only got 18 minutes left. So I guess I want to hear from the panel about what are the next steps? Where are we going? What are we going to do with these videos? And not to put too many people on the spot, but who do I want to hear from? Next steps. Maybe Tony, can I jump down to you? Just about what are the next steps for Shift? Where do we see the videos going? Is it okay to put you on the spot, Tony?
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, I think we've already explained where they're going to go. There's the website. They're going to be used in the learning environment to educate everyone, not just people who work in healthcare or social care. Anyone could access them for learning. But also moving forward, there's going to be quite a lot of marketing of the stuff that we've done in order so people can use it and are aware of it as well. And I think that's about it from me again.
Does anybody else want to jump in on that? I do have one more. Oh yeah, Sophie?
Yeah, I was just going to say that from lead partner perspective, our role is also to really get the message out there about these projects and the funding and all the amazing work they've done. So we will really, as the person who's kind of responsible for the communication of the European aspect of the project, these videos are a dream come true for me. It's so easy to get them out there, get the message out, because they're so well done. I think we've said that, but it's worth saying it again. They're so well done and they're so relatable. So we can, from our perspective, we'll be putting them out there to stakeholders across Europe, and not just in the partner countries, but across the whole of Europe, and why not further as well. So I think they're done in such a way that anyone anywhere can watch them and relate to them. So they'll certainly be going out and hopefully picked up by the media as well, like some of our previous articles around this project have been, because I think it is a topic that, although it's still a bit taboo amongst a lot of people, it is a topic that gets people's interest and gets out there. So it's going to be interesting to see how far they can go.
Mm-hmm. I agree, and I'm always very passionate about access to education, and this is not the thing to look at the global politics. This isn't the right forum, but I often think education is one of the key tools to so many of the problems that we see, and there's absolutely no reason when these are freely available online that they have to stay within Europe. They can go anywhere and everywhere. Of course, they will be less relevant. For example, some sexual health services may be more difficult to access in other countries. Some of the experiences won't be translatable, but a lot of them will. And so I think it's really useful to be able to say, oh, look, these are resources that anybody can benefit from. And, if it's an issue of subtitles, how difficult is that? It's not difficult at all. So I think, I think there's real scope for this work. Kate, I just wanted to hear from you a little bit more about sort of what you see as next steps, because you've been really intimately involved in the VLE and with the focus on the kind of the wider workforce. So if you don't mind, I'll put you on the spot as well.
Thanks. And actually, I wanted to just follow on something you and Sophie were just saying there, because as a Belgian partner, the organization of healthcare in Belgium is quite different than in the UK and the Netherlands, especially around sexual health. Yeah. And so that was sort of picking up on what we talked about, the pan-European thing, but also for the next steps for the future. So for instance, sort of accessible sexual health clinics specifically for that are not widely available in Flanders, which is where I work and live. And in the same way, so it's a lot of individual practitioners. So people go to their GP, people go to see a particular general health clinic, and then sexual health has to come up, or they have access through, perhaps a social worker or other needs. So for me, for the next steps for this project, that wider workforce and that broader awareness is really important. And I thought that was what was nice about the videos. The stories don't hinge on, you see a particular practitioner or you're in a particular setting. They're much broader than that. And one of the videos that wasn't shown today, I forgot the character's names, but about the recent immigrant who is experiencing problems. The person who helps him has nothing to do with healthcare. And I think it's a really nice example that will be very translatable for the context that I'm working in. And similarly then, that gives the training programs we're developing an extra resonance for us, because we're not really targeting people who work in Magny's clinic. We're targeting all the people we're hoping will, in her case in the UK, or in Wim's case in the Netherlands, who will signpost people or get patients to the right clinics. In our case, it's also a lot of sense making people aware, thinking that they need to follow up, what kind of support can they give within their own practices. So I think it's really exciting, and that I think it's nice for a European project to be more broadly used, that we do have 3 countries here with 3 very different healthcare systems, because it just makes it more usable in other parts of the world. So I think that would be the thoughts that I wanted to share on that.
Absolutely, Kate. I think what you're sort of is, I think all good research answers some questions and raises some further questions. And I think in this case, that's exactly what we've done. We've sort of identified what's important to people. I think we've done a really wonderful job at, you know, getting a variety of feedback and information from all three of the countries involved in the project. And you know what that's really done is enabled us to create these videos as well as these learning resources around those topics. But I think it's also raised a lot of questions around, okay, well, what do we do now? Where do we go from here? And that will really vary from country to country. And, you know, what the next steps will be will look very different. You know, so for example, so I don't know, for some people watching might know that I recently moved to Portugal. And it's really surprised me here that sexual health is still seen very much as a specialist field. And I don't mean complex sexual health or, you know, second level or third level sexual health care. I mean very basic stuff like contraception and STI, you know, screening. It's still seen as a real specialist field. And I know that HIV care, for example, here is still very much centered in the, you know, the 3 or 4 major cities in the country. It's still very much has an MSM lens, so a men who have sex with men lens, and it's still very much, oh no, we don't deal with that. That's somebody else. So it sounds to me like Belgium is very similar, you know, where maybe the next steps is further integration. And then I'm thinking about things like the menopause. I know at Metro we're just in the process of finalizing a menopause policy, and you know I know that's a conversation that's currently happening in the UK. So that's a very different next step. Wim, I don't know what sort of the next steps might be for the Netherlands. But you can jump in if you want to. But I think it's just, you know, it's interesting to note that this research has thrown up, you know, really good data. And for lack of a better word, we don't want to, you know, reduce people's lived experiences to data, but it is data. And, you know, really good insight, really good, you know, understanding of, you know, what are the common themes, but it's also asked, you know, those bigger questions around, okay, you know, where do we need to fill the gaps going forward? And I think, you know, that's real evidence of a good project. We've only got 10 minutes left. Does somebody want to have Wim? Yeah.
Yeah. To answer your question, Amanda, I think that the films are can be of very good use in the VLEs we made for Shift, also in the Netherlands, but also other VLEs, because we have several others. Also focusing on GP assistants, for example, and there is a group of GPs called Sexhag. That's GPs who are specialized in sexual health, and I would love to present a couple of the movies to them and see if they can use them, and I think they can use them, and of course we would like to show them to the general population, which is sort of exciting because we are very experienced as an organization in making movies for youngsters and MSM and sex workers, movies like these, but we haven't done so for the older population. And I think it's exciting to see what happens if we present them to them, and do they feel addressed? Do they welcome them? And I think that's also an exciting part of Shift. And the one movie Kate also mentioned, the one about the immigrant with a possible STI. I know that's Stuart and Tom, more or less. I think the working title of the movie was The Mussen, and we are actually together with a community center in The Hague called The Mussen for Shift. We are working we call it a neighborhood approach, and next week I'll show this movie to them and see how we can use them. And one of the nice things we want to do, for example, is that there's a peer project called the Schilderswijk Moeders, the Schilderswijk Mothers, and what they would love to, we had an expert meeting with them, and what they would love to do is signposting on social media. And maybe we can use this immigrant movie for signposting on social media and see what happens. So very exciting stuff. Looking forward to it.
Thank you, Wim. Now I've been told that we've got a question from the public, but it's probably me being technically rubbish. I can't see the question. Do we have a question from the general public? And if I can't see it, but somebody else can we read? Why hasn't? Oh yeah, we got it. Love the films. Wonderful, thank you. Okay, sorry, I'm clearly not cut out for this. Love the films. Why hasn't anybody made resources like this before? Great question. And I'm so pleased that you like the films. Who wants to answer that? Does anybody want to answer that? Mani and then Sophie.
Thank you for the question. And from my perspective, and I think it's probably a bit of a theme which runs through the Shift project, is we're trying to push the conversation about sexual health for what we call this silent majority. So there's a lot of people in the world, in Europe, in England, in Belgium, in the Netherlands, who are over 45 who have sex. And as we've mentioned before, there's been a lot of public health push for younger people or certain socioeconomic groups, or, for example, LGBTQI+. So there's a lot of focused public health, but this is something that's much bigger, much broader, much more represented. And I think that's probably why it begins to resonate a little bit more. And I think if we can push the conversation, which we're doing with Shift and with this Shift Live, I think we can certainly bolster that and then get people to see themselves a bit more in these films and then push that conversation, push that dialogue. And I think it's a great asset, as everyone has all said.
I agree, Mani. Sophie?
Yeah, I think I was going to say something similar, but coming at it from someone who's not a sexual health professional, someone who's a project manager and used to these kind of projects that are funded by public funding. I think the very simple answer to that question is because no one had funded it before, because it wasn't a priority. It wasn't people didn't see it as a priority, where obviously this project demonstrates that it is a priority. And like Manu says, there are a lot of people over 45 in the 3 countries represented here, but in the world who are having sex, and this topic is so important. And yeah, I think the first time it landed on our desk at the Health in Europe Centre, the initial reaction, like we see with that young healthcare professional in the videos, kind of go, what? Oh. And then when you start looking into it, I mean, I'm not 45 and not anywhere near 45 at the moment, and my initial reaction was, why? What is this project about? But when you start looking into it and realize that actually, of course, why shouldn't this be funded? And I think that's why people haven't made resources like this before, because people don't talk about it enough, and it's not out there enough to think, actually, we need funding for this. So I'm really glad we got it.
I think that's exactly right, what both of you have said. And to add to it, the word that came to my mind was appetite. And I think that there's that real kind of dichotomy of what comes first. Is it the chicken or is it the egg? Is it, the appetite for something, or is it the advocacy for something? And I think that they often just do go hand in hand, that, when evidence becomes available, you start to advocate for it when you're, a working professional. But at the same time, I think there needs to be a social appetite for it. And certainly, I've been working in sexual health for, most of my career. And I have definitely felt the tides change in the last sort of, I would say 3 to 5 years. Just that people are more open to talking about sexual health. People seem to be a little bit better educated. I don't know if that has to do with the education we're doing in schools or not. And I say some people, I should say some people seem to be better educated, some still are not. But it just seems that there's more discussion around things like the menopause, things like women's health, things like sort of pronouns, and people are talking more about sex and relationships and identity. And so I think then there's a social appetite for this kind of work as well, because if you're going to create these great resources, somebody needs to want to watch them, and I think people do. Tony, you're on mute.
Crikey, I'm useless with this at the moment, aren't I?
Me too.
So, yeah, but I try. Just making the point that quite often sort of films and videos previously and projects have been quite focused and one-dimensional. So they'll look at STIs, they'll look at menopause. They're not holistic. This project is very much much more holistic, looking at wider health, wider relationships, and wider societal moves as well. And that's what makes it really exciting, because it's not sat in a silo. We're not separating things out in little pigeonholes. And I think that makes it more usable.
Yeah. I agree. I think it's exactly taking it out of silos and into, the world. And I think that is what we're starting to do. And I really have the, this sort of idea that, this work will be really not just innovative, because it's already innovative, but really pioneering as well. And, that we might, and I think we are, we're part of the shift, but we're part of the shift towards, talking about these things. See how I did that? That was really good. We're starting to shift, and we're starting to help the shift. So we're running out of time. We've only got 2 minutes left. I do want to just give a shout out to our lead partners at the Health in Europe Centre. I don't know how you put up with all of us. You guys are just wonderful. And you somehow managed to get all of our reporting and accounts in time so that we can continue to do the work. So thank you to the Health in Europe Centre and to Sophie in particular for joining us today. And just, to acknowledge that the project is funded by the Interreg 2Cs. And, this wouldn't be possible without them. Tom, do you have a hand? Yes.
Yeah, just while we're doing thank yous as well. I mean, obviously we've got Nuri here, and we've myself and Stu obviously worked on the films, but also a big thank you to Nutmeg Productions as well.
Absolutely.
Who with the production company that kind of coordinated getting our fantastic team together, which obviously included Nuri as a director and Patrick, who Nuri mentioned. So a big thank you to them and Harry and Isabel over there. So yeah, just wanted to say that as well.
Absolutely. And I was going to finish with a big round of applause, but before we do that, I realized that one thing that I didn't put in my my script, and so therefore this is off piece. So apologies to everybody. But if people want to watch the videos now, what's the best way for them to do it? Can they go onto YouTube and see them? Does anybody know the answer to that question? Tom?
They are on our Vimeo page.
Okay,
so,
Vimeo.
Vimeo. We can post the links in the chat afterwards, I think, on Facebook and YouTube, etc.
Okay, so post-production, you will see some links that will take you to the Vimeo. See, I don't even know what a Vimeo is. Like, I am not cut out for this. I should definitely be like in the over 85 population when it comes to technology. Honestly, they need a special category just for me. So we'll put it in post-production. People can see the links, because I think hopefully people will want to watch them after this. Now, I had a fun idea. Since it is STIQ Day, I realize we're 1 minute over already, but hopefully you guys will indulge me. I thought that it might be interesting, especially from Nuri, who and maybe from Sophie, who don't necessarily have a sexual health background, just to say, if we could all say one thing, either that we learned from the videos or that we think is important when it comes to taking care of your sexual health, just to mark STIQ Day as we're here on the 14th of January. Maybe I won't start with you guys, because I think that would be extra mean. So why don't I go in the reverse order? And then actually that works, because then I can finish. So Tony, do you have one without putting you too much on the spot?
Well, you did put me on the spot, didn't
Well, I did. But I know you can handle it.
Yeah. I think there's a thing about honesty and communication in relationships, and I think those videos really illustrate that. That was more than one word, sorry.
No, it doesn't have to be a word, just a thought. And that was a great one. I knew I could count on you. Tom, do you mind if I jump to you?
Yeah, it was something I was going to mention earlier as well, and something that we were trying to kind of always weave in was non-judgmental. So although characters might make mistakes, and obviously people in real life make mistakes or don't have the knowledge about certain things, it's not to judge those characters or judge those people in real life, those humans. Yeah, we're always all learning. So I think, yeah, that was really important as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Tom. I know sometimes I think, oh, there's nothing more I could learn. And then I get to work and I realize there's still a lot to go. So absolutely. Sophie, do you mind if I come to you? Is that okay?
Yeah, sure. I was going to say just normalizing the discussion. Like you said, Amanda, that there's a lot of discussions now that we're talking more about mental health. We're talking more about so many things, and normalizing these discussions intergenerationally. I'm lucky to have a 90-year-old grandmother who will happily, well, I don't know if I'm lucky to, but she'll happily do her sex life to anyone who will listen. But yeah, just having those conversations intergenerationally and not making it a kind of ooh subject when it doesn't have to be. It's everyone's doing it, and everyone can talk about it.
Absolutely. And and for the people who aren't doing it, like it's absolutely one of those things where that's fine too. It's all exactly what you're saying, that everyone, what they're doing is great. And the more we talk about it, the happier we'll be. That sounds like a little song. Mani, do you mind if I jump to you?
Thanks, Amanda. So this STIQ Day, I want as many people as possible to talk loud and proud about sex, sexual health, intimacy, pleasure. Just have that discussion.
I love it. Thank you, Manu. Kate.
Well, because we're doing this also linked to the films, what I liked, and somebody mentioned it also, is that more holistic perspective. This is part of life. I think that's a key message. It's not like an extra add-on thing. And so that for all social and healthcare practitioners in particular, and people in general, sexual health is just part of your life. We can't just ignore that whole section. So we need to integrate it somehow. And these films really reflect that nicely.
Great. Thank you, Kate. And Vim. You're on mute.
You're never too old to dot.
I like it. So what you're saying is that I'm never too old to learn how to use technology?
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you, Vim. And last but not least, director. I'm so
to
sorry.
learn what Vimeo is, yes.
Yeah, what Vimeo is, exactly. I'm so sorry about earlier, Nuri. I should have asked before, but I didn't think about it. So
right.
Director Nuri, over to you.
I think it's all been said, but I think it's just that communication is so important, and there's a human story behind everybody's experience, and there's always sort of help out there. I think it's an important message that you're sort of bringing across. So I think that's what I learned.
Great, thank you. And I guess that just leaves me to wrap up and say goodbye to everybody. And I guess my this is STIQ Day, and what I want for everybody message is just one around positivity and pleasure. And I think that really circles back to the beginning, that whatever you do or don't do, we want you to do it in a way that is pleasurable and positive for you, however that looks and whatever that means. And we as sexual health professionals are here to support you, to give you the information, the supplies, the resources, and also hopefully the confidence to discuss it. And as we all start to shift, I hope that that's where we get to in the end. So with that, I will do one final round of applause to the great film team, Nuri, Tom, and where's Stuart? He's disappeared. Nuri, Tom, and Stuart.
His whole setup with his phone and everything, unfortunately the battery died, and he
no.
Yes, he did send an email. Yeah.
We'll give a virtual round of applause to Stuart, and a real round of applause to Tom and Nuri. Just really, really well done. So well done, everybody. And thank you to everybody watching this as well.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.